I write the Real Britain column at the Daily Mirror newspaper. It's a weekly column which kind of stands up for our readers on a whole host of different issues, and we run a lot of social justice campaigns sort of via the column. I also run several of the Mirror's projects, including Britain Talks, that we're going to talk about today, and the Wigan Peer Project, which follows kind of George Orwell's route that he took 80 years ago and looks at the issues facing people today along that route. So first of all, thank you so much for having us here today. We're big fans of Refugee Week at the Mirror, as I hope you all know, and arguably some kind of antidote to government rhetoric has rarely been needed as much as this year. I think if we all thought that the hostile environment was kind of peak hostility, they raised us the Borders Bill, which, as we know, is coming back soon to the House of Commons. One of the most dangerous pieces of legislation ever designed by the Home Office. So this is definitely a time to try and think in new ways about how to take on our opponents. So what can we do about it? I guess when our values and people that we care for come under attack, there's always a temptation to respond defensively and to hit back. And I think that's natural. We want to show solidarity. We want to protect people who, after all, have come through unimaginable dangers to seek safety in our country and don't deserve to be attacked. But the more that our opponents get us to respond like this, the narrower our movement becomes. And we know that the answer deep down, I think, is really the opposite, that somehow we have to be more open, we have to be more able to listen, we need to pull down walls instead of building them higher, because we all know that in the end we can't win alone. So this workshop is kind of about considering something which can feel counterintuitive. So something like Michelle Obama's saying, when they go low, we go high, and to act with hope. As Rebecca Solnit says, hope is a gift you don't have to surrender, a power you don't have to give away. Hope, she says, is an embrace of the unknown and the unknowable, an alternative to the certainty of both optimists and pessimists. So 2016 was peak pessimism, I think, for most of us, provoked by kind of populism that was playing on people's deepest fears. It felt as if our country had entered these deep tunnels of division from which we couldn't see out. And then something even worse happened for many of us in this movement and parallel movements, which was that our friend Joe Cox was murdered. And the challenge for all of us at that time really was to how can we put aside our anger and our despair and try to think more like Joe. This is a very difficult challenge, particularly to me. So around that time, I'd heard about a project in Germany that had come out of the refugee crisis and divisions that had come out around it, that was called My Country Talks. It was established in Berlin, and it was partly an acknowledgement that lots of Berliners, kind of young sort of hip people in the city, felt a clash between their views and their way of seeing the world with other people in Germany. So they set up My Country Talks, which is basically a way to just get people talking to people they wouldn't normally hold conversations with. And we talked to them about basically borrowing their mechanism, borrowing all their kind of technology to set up a similar thing in the UK. So we held the very first Britain Talks on the first anniversary of the Brexit vote in 2017. We asked people to sign up to a project to meet someone with opposing political views. Around that time, it was mainly across a kind of Remain Leave axis, how people were divided, but also inevitably we could see other sort of parallel axes of division operating. So for example, young and old was one of them, people living in towns and people living in cities, all kinds of other different divisions kind of became obvious. So we asked people to have a chat with someone with a different political view, and we kind of thought maybe nobody would sign up, because nobody really at that time was very keen on speaking to people on the kind of opposite side. But thousands of people signed up, and that was a real shock to us. We partnered with the Daily Express, which was quite a challenge in itself. It's not always easy for Daily Mirror, people who work at the Mirror, to hang out with people at Daily Express, but we had to cross our own divides to sort of to bring the project together. And we matched sort of Express readers and Mirror readers together. And that year we did it in person. That's the only year so far that we've managed to do it in person, because obviously COVID then meant subsequent years we went online. But a lot of people actually met for a coffee, they met for a pint, they met for like a meal or just for a walk. And all of the feedback that we had from people was that they'd had an amazing time. They'd expected to meet kind of a monster, and they'd met someone who actually supported the same local football team, or had kids the same age, or liked food, or whatever they were able to find things in common which had really surprised them, because they'd met a human being, basically. So we've now run Britain Talks 3 times, as well as a spin-off version, Europe Talks, which we've run twice. Europe Talks is basically, while we've been running Britain Talks, other countries have started to run their version. So there's now Sweden Talks, Serbia Talks. They even did an American version this year, which I think will be particularly fascinating. And so when people take part in Europe Talks, they get matched with someone in a different country, which for us is particularly important. We've come out of the EU. We feel like these countries are still our neighbours. How do we keep fostering communication between ourselves and, you know, people in neighbouring countries who are experiencing many of the same issues that we are? And I guess the reason that we keep doing it is because sidestepping the culture wars is really being able to talk to each other, I think, is one of the greatest challenges of our movement, because how can we end child poverty? How can we solve the climate crisis if we can't even talk to each other? And I think we deep down, we understand that the culture wars are a trap. It doesn't mean that they're easy to resist, but these fires are kind of being deliberately stoked by people who want us running around thinking about those issues instead of thinking about the deeper issues that are affecting our society. And by culture wars, I suppose I mean statues, like all of these different issues. It's not that those issues aren't important and they don't need defending and they don't need discussing, but in many ways we just have to question how we're being drawn into those debates and kind of and what they achieve in the end. Is it more important to, you know, dismantle the colonial project, or is it more important to kind of argue with someone on Twitter about a statue? So these are some of the decisions that we have to make ourselves. And I think it's no coincidence that the kind of algorithms of surveillance capitalism are always trying to push us further and further and deeper into silos, so that Facebook will always show us the people that are the same as us and keep pushing us down further and further into these kind of silos. So one of the interesting things about Britain Talks for us was it was a way of harnessing algorithms and technology in a kind of opposite way that sort of widens people's kind of circle. So, and I think the challenge for all of us is to reach out of those silos professionally, which is not easy, and also personally. And I think we all have to think, how many people do we know who don't think like us? That's sort of a personal question for all of us. So this isn't without challenge, and I think particularly within this movement, as much as anywhere, because this is something I think maybe some of you could help us with today, and something to think about in your breakout rooms later, is kind of as a movement, how do we negotiate the tension between the need to protect and stand with people seeking sanctuary, and how do we reach out to groups who might be hostile to immigrants? There's obviously there's a tension there, and it's very important that we have a good way of kind of overcoming that tension. So anyway, so today that's more or less enough for me. There's a couple of brilliant people that I've invited to talk to us. Britain Talks mostly takes place in these kind of thousands of private conversations that are happening across the UK and across Europe, as I've said, but show sort of how it works. Every year we ask a few people if they'll let us follow their conversations with a camera. And one of those people, Razan, is with us today. She very bravely agreed to take part in one of the first Britain Talks films that we ever made. Razan's an entrepreneur and cheesemaker, well, and chef, and all kinds of, doing all kinds of amazing things. He came here from Syria to find a safe place for her and her family. And she met Bob Roberts, who was he's a very staunch Brexiteer, a lobster fisherman from Scarborough. And we asked the two of them to meet for a film, which we're going to show you in a second. And today we're also going to hear from Kirsty McNeill, who we're very lucky to have today. She's Save the Children's Executive Director for Policy, Advocacy and Campaigns. She's a former Special Advisor in Number 10, which I'm sure we'd love to ask her about this week of all weeks as well. And, amongst a host of campaigning roles and achievements. And the reason I asked Kirsty to come today was that she and her co-author, Roger Harding, wrote what I think is one of the best explanations about the culture wars and the traps that we can easily all fall into and how to resist them that I've read. So we're going to ask her to give us a sort of précis of that work and help us a bit later. So first of all, Marcia, if we could show the film, and then I'm just going to have a little chat with Razan, and there'll be lots of chance to ask questions at the end as well. So if you've got questions for us, do share them.
There's no voice.
Oh, yeah.
Daily, then I sell it on to restaurants throughout Yorkshire.
My name is... Good.
My name's Bob Roberts. I own a fishing boat out of Scarborough and also the Yorkshire Lobster Company. My boat fishes daily, then I sell it on to restaurants throughout Yorkshire.
My name is Razan Alsous. I'm Syrian refugee. I came to the UK in 2012. Leaving home as well is not an easy thing to say, okay, I'm moving home. When you have war, you don't have an option. You will think about the kids. You cannot actually risk their life. And this is why we decided to come to the UK.
We're in a bit of a bubble here in Scarborough, in so much that we don't have a lot of foreign labour. Not to the extent it is in Leeds or London. I think there's a responsibility to integrate. Various governments should have made sure that integration was carried out well.
I have established a new cheese maker, making the Syrian style of cheese we call squeaky cheese. I love Yorkshire. And this is why when we did establish the business, we decided to make it Yorkshire Dama cheese, as Yorkshire our new home. And Dama is abbreviation to Damascus. Nice to see you. Alaikum salam. Thank you very much. How are you? Good?
I'm good, thank you.
Yeah. No, I'm fine. Nice weather
Good
today.
journey. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, exciting. Usually go early morning for...
4 o'clock, 5 o'clock.
Well,
Yeah.
well, we work at early morning as well, but to collect the milk. It's very interesting what he's doing. I liked that he's keep the passion about picking the lobster off the harbor, right?
What's your head?
Yeah.
So, why did you move here?
Because of the war, actually, there were a car bomb under my husband's office.
Yeah.
And this is why we thought to leave.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's totally understandable.
Yes.
Isn't it?
Yeah.
see you again.
How's the journey from Scarborough to here?
Good.
Good.
Good, thank you. Yeah.
Yeah. Welcome, Yorkshire Dam and Cheese.
Yeah. It's better than my office.
Oh, welcome in our production area
Wow.
in Yorkshire Dam and Cheese.
Yeah.
Here were the operations.
It's cracking.
It used to be an ice cream maker. With this, we had the bronze prize for the World Cheese Awards.
Really?
Yeah, this has got a huge memory because when we started, it was just £2,500 loan.
Yeah.
That's it.
It's been interesting how she's adapted, starting up from scratch with a small grant. A lot of what's missing in the world, you know, that, and obviously she's looking forward now rather than behind her, and becoming that part of that Yorkshire brand is part of that. Then, you know, she's probably more Yorkshire than some people that have been born and bred here. Really, she's taking it fully on board what Yorkshireness means.
Look at this. So I'm like in a 5-star restaurant now. Wow, very tasty.
Yeah.
I feel the taste of Scarborough Ocean.
Oh, really? It's squeaky.
I think my point of view, as I'm from outside of the UK, as we need to be strong here.
My personal biggest fear is that we have a council that doesn't support the fishing industry. The only industry in Scarborough is tourism.
Yeah.
And we've got to look beyond tourism.
The UK got lots of gems, but just we need to know how to polish it and make it shine.
Well, yeah. A lot of people have a negative viewpoint about immigration and, you know, and refugees, and embrace it for, you know, because it does enrich society.
It's really nice to listen to others' points of view. You are a treasure for Yorkshire. People need to go on your boat and just see how we're making lobster. Yes, absolutely. I really encourage everybody to do it.
Thank you.
Thank you for all the hospitality. Thank you very much.
My pleasure.
Thank you.
Thank you. I just wanted to apologise for the glitchy nature of that film. I'm not sure if it was as glitchy for everyone else as it was for me. And I was also, I'll share the link with all of our films in a minute, because you might be interested in a few different ones that we've made across different issues. And I also was enjoying the subtitles where squeaky cheese became cheeky cheese, and it was Yorkshire Dammit cheese was another one instead of Yorkshire Dammer. And what I love about that film is when Bob says to Razan that she's more Yorkshire than most Yorkshire people, which I think definitely wasn't a view that he would have had before the two of them met and spent that time together. So I always find that really moving to see. Razan, I wanted to ask you, did you have any worries about appearing in the film and meeting Bob, like before you met him? Did you worry whether it would be a good experience?
First of all, thank you for inviting me today and meeting all those and reading actually all these nice messages. And this video made me go back a bit actually in the time. I think it's been now 3 years or 4 years since we did the filming. I don't know, I've forgotten about it, but it made me in tears actually. Cheese brings tears sometimes as well. Anyway, it was a quite strange thing actually when you have asked me to join the program, and because I felt that made me into a question, what is my position? You know, we talked about Brexit. So first of all, if you ask me, when you asking me about my opinion, that made me feel that I've got a valuable opinion. That made myself feel like at that time I wasn't yet a British citizen, and I felt how really like to nationality is not documentation, it's not paperwork, it's being active in the society, to have opinion. This is something really amazing, and that you care about what I'm thinking. I felt, yes, why not? Let's go into this and see how it looks like. I don't think like it's a bit scary to go by myself to a place. I never been in Scarborough before, and meeting someone who's really new to me, and you know, initially that he got a different opinion than yours, and maybe against your opinion, so it's a big challenge. But I thought, as long as I'm living in Britain, I'm protected, and I thought, what could be go wrong actually? Let's talk. Sometimes even a person, at the end of the day, we are all humans. Even a person you don't know, you never met, from absolutely different mentality, there's no harm actually to meet and talk. Sometimes when you talk, you can see now at the end of the film, actually I really respect Rob, and we had really amazing day together. I've seen the world from his point of view, and there's no problem in this. Sometimes we might find a mid solution, or we making the points of view getting closer to find a result. So yeah, it's been really nice experience.
And do you have any advice for people when they're thinking about trying to reach out to someone like Bob, who on paper he would, you know, he was very worried when we spoke to him before the film. He was very worried about immigration, and he was worried about immigration because he lives in a town that he's seen change. He's got kids and grandchildren. He's worried about whether they're going to have work. He feels like the fishing industry is being decimated, and that was the only thing that Scarborough used to have. And he starts from a very defensive position, really. He just wants things to go back as they were. And he sees the arrival of immigrants as part of that change. And yet he had never really spoken to anyone who'd come from a different background, and clearly that had quite a profound effect on him. So yeah, I'm just wondering, do you have advice for others here who are thinking about how to reach out to people like Bob?
I think we need to simplify things. We don't really need to overcomplicate things, because from his point of view, he looks at immigrants as people coming here to take his opportunity. This is what he thought at the beginning, because this is what the media introduced, how the media introduced immigration. So while if he thought they've got different assets, which is their culture, we're looking at things from different angles. When I decided to make the cheese, the halloumi style cheese, it wasn't something new to the British market. The cheese being already available in supermarkets, but I spot the gap of making it from the British milk and using the local resources. So from like my idea started when I compared the tasty milk made in Britain or produced in Britain with the finished product of cheese. So this will not come from a person who lived, bred and born in the UK, because you don't feel like anything special about the British milk. You drink it every day. So when refugees or immigrants in general coming to different country, they bring in an asset, you get another taster, another point of view, another way of thinking. Like if you remember in the video, I told Rob, I can see if he can, like, instead of saying the fishing industry becomes really is dying by time, I told him I can see if this could be changed into a tourist point where you can ask people, do you want to have this adventure? So people will think it's interesting to try once to go with Rob into a fishing journey. So this could be like a tourist point to do. So I'm creating an idea for him. So instead of complaining that I'm not having the lobster, where to sell it and how to do it. So going out of the tradition sometimes that enable the society or the community actually to nourish, to have something new. So I think immigrants could add more color to life rather than keep it on the same routine, same rhythm.
Brilliant, thank you. One of the things that I love about Razan is that you see life through the analogy of cheese, which I think will be a way for us all to see the world, basically. I know people have questions for Razan, but if we ask them, we'll ask them at the end. We'll make sure we leave time. So we're just going to hear next from Kirsty. So this is a bit more food for thought before we go to the breakout rooms. Go on, Kirsty.
Thanks, Ros, and thanks to all of you, not just for spending this time together today, but for everything you're doing in communities. It's been really inspiring watching that in the chat. Just to give a little introduction to me. So hi, I'm Kirsty. I work historically at the sort of intersection between public opinion and public pressure and public policy. So I'm a campaigner at heart, but I always want to see our kind of values and ideals rendered kind of universal in public policy. I tweet about this sort of stuff quite a lot at Kirsty J. McNeill. If you want to follow up on anything, really happy to answer any questions. And because I've always operated in that space where public opinion and public pressure and public policy meet, last year I noticed that a lot of causes and communities that I care about were being hurt and undermined by the so-called culture wars. And we did a bunch of research about it and wrote a report about it. And I'll talk through what our findings were. But first, I just want to say, don't worry if you haven't heard this term, right? Because it's a fabricated political term. There'd be no reason for you to have heard it in your communities. But let me talk you through it a little bit. So sometimes in the newspapers or in discussion shows, you'll hear people talking about the culture wars, and it's a term that's been imported from America. And what it traditionally refers to is fights that are about heritage or identity or values. And of course, heritage and identity and values are perfectly legitimate things to have debates and discussions about, but they become culture war issues when they get framed as a binary fight where there's only two sides and that they are irretrievably divided and they are having an argument that is such a level of fervor that it feels like a war, an existential fight that you have to win. Your side or your tribe or your team has to win it. And our finding about those so-called culture war fights, and Ros has mentioned some of them, there were fights about statues or how many flags people have behind them when they're giving a speech. And we thought, actually, that's not how we're going to get through life in a really complicated democracy with lots of different opinions and backgrounds. How we're going to have to learn to live together if we want to have a plural liberal democracy is we're going to have to learn to listen and not separate out into these groups. So we invited all of our readers of this report to ask themselves one question, which is, do I think I'm here to win a culture war or am I here to end it? And the one thing I'd love you to take away from our time together is actually all of us have a lot of agency in whether we're actually trying to end these divisions and these so-called wars. But if we're going to end them, we need to understand them. So I would say the key thing to remember, if you remember nothing else about the culture wars, is we said they were real, but not authentic. And what we meant by that was they are real, right? There are fights that are getting played out endlessly on talk radio, on TV, in newspapers. They're real in that they're really causing harm. So if you're on the sharp end of a culture war fight about identity or race or migration, you know it, right? It's real, but it's not authentic. And what we meant by that was these fabricated fights don't represent real divisions in our communities that are gulfs that we cannot possibly close over. As we just saw in the video, people actually in their neighborhoods and in their workplaces and in their places of worship and at their local parks, people are having conversations all the time where they might disagree, but it doesn't become brittle and hardened into that idea of we can never talk or never work together. And we say that they are inauthentic because they're being orchestrated. And it's important to understand what interests are at play here. So sometimes people are orchestrating these fabricated fights just for money, right? Because it helps get eyeballs onto their website or it helps sell their newspaper. So sometimes it's pure commercial gain. And people are doing things that I consider unethical for commercial gain, but it's an understandable impulse that people want to make a profit. Sometimes people are engaging in the culture war to increase their reach. So they want more people to read their blogs, follow them on social media, tune in to their show. So sometimes it's just about making something feel like it's controversial, so it's a discussion point, so that more people tune in emotionally to what you're doing. Sometimes people are doing it for reputational reasons, that they want to be the chief provocateur. Now, I always think that a self-proclaimed provocateur is one of the most boring things that anyone could possibly be. So like picking arguments for attention is normally a sign to me that you've not got anything genuinely interesting to say. But there are some people who want their reputation to be, I'm a controversialist. How tedious, but nonetheless fairly common. And the fourth reason, and the reason that this is particularly important for those of us who care about public policy around migration and asylum, is some people are doing it for political advantage. So they want to stoke grievance or a sense of zero sum, i.e. if I'm winning, you must be losing. We can't all be getting better together. They want to stoke it for their political advantage. And unfortunately, that's quite a rational thing to do, because sometimes votes do move on the basis of a sense of grievance or division, or a sense that you've been hard done by while someone else is doing better. So there are lots of different reasons why it happens, but it has a fairly predictable set of effects. And it does two things primarily to those of us who are in an activist or social justice or social change space. First of all, it distracts us. So every single argument that we are having about a statue is time that we are not spending arguing about how we create a humane framework for people to seek asylum. So things are dangled, and we are so enraged and enervated by them that we spend a lot of time having that conversation and not dealing with the really big challenges that face our country. So it can distract us. The second effect it has is it can divide us, and it can divide people who would self-describe as activists or campaigners or social change folks. It divides us both from the public, because every time a fight happens where you have to pick a side and you have to say, I subscribe wholeheartedly to this whole suite of ideas, some of which are unfamiliar and completely new to public audiences. Every time we say, I have to pass that bar and I have to say all of those things simultaneously, or I've somehow fallen short, it can divide people who are doing the work of social change from mainstream audiences who, let's face it, almost all of us have loads of time that we're spending doing the dishes, getting the washing done, taking our parents to health appointments, getting the kids to bed. So it can distance us from audiences who are too busy getting on, doing work in their communities or their families to keep track of all the different debates and all the different shifts in language. So it can distance social change folks from the general public, but it can also divide us from one another, because we end up having really hot arguments with one another about who is perfectly pure in their understanding of any question, rather than saying, we agree on 95% of this, so let's see what we can do together. So it has the effect of distracting us and dividing us. But don't despair, because what we found in our research was there are things that we can do, all of us, whether we are ordinary members of the public, whether we're activists, whether we're funders, whether we're in politics, whether we're journalists, whether we just use social media, there are things that we can do. And we found that there was 4 main strategies that people can take when they know that a culture war fight is being injected into the spaces where they operate. The first is, we all need to think, and I know that loads of folks in your movement are already doing this, we must radically diversify our movements so that people are speaking for themselves and coming to points of agreement and disagreement with no one essentially taking their voice from them and caricaturing their position. So people should be able to say, I think this from my experience, my perspective, my values, without anyone, whether it's a newspaper columnist or someone else, saying, here's a group of people who have this incredibly unreasonable demand. It's political correctness gone mad. That happens because we don't have enough people with lived experience who can actually go and have that conversation themselves and say, no, actually, that's not what we're asking for at all. We're not asking for every statue in Britain to get taken down. We're asking for a humane asylum system. So diversifying our movement means we've got many more credible spokespeople who can stop some of the caricaturing that happens. The second thing is, we need to get more confident in calling it out. So if you ever find yourself being interviewed on local radio and someone says, surely we've got more things to worry about than whether we take everyone who is a white British person off the school curriculum, you should feel very confident to say, I know what you're doing. Like, I see what's going on here. You now want me to get into a conversation about the curriculum when I'm here to talk about humane asylum. So feel confident in saying, if someone's playing a game with you and trying to set a trap for you, it's okay to say, I see what's happening. And you know what? I think the viewers and listeners will see what's happening too. Let's get back to what really matters. The conversation that I'm here to discuss is a humane asylum system. The third thing is, and this is difficult in the way that Ros and Razan have described, we all need to decide as individual citizens, is our commitment to democracy more important to us than our commitment to our particular passions and values? And I would argue it has to be, because democracy is how we live together well despite differences, and we reconcile the different choices we each make without violence. And being a Democrat before you are anything else, before you're a partisan for a cause or a party, being a Democrat first means being willing to take the heat out of how you engage with other people. So being responsible about how you mount arguments on social media, being responsible when you find yourself in disagreement, saying, I'm willing to take a step back and listen with good faith and assume the best motive in my opponent while we're having this conversation. So there's a suite of choices we can each make about who we give our attention to and how we choose to behave and how we interact with each other. And the fourth, and this is tough, the fourth is actually people get pulled into, and we feel it too, right? So this isn't something that happens to everyone else, but not to people from the social change world. We get pulled into it too. When we are frightened that our life isn't going to turn out as we hoped or wanted, we get pulled into the, who's taking something from us? I feel frightened that I'm going to lose out. So the way to take the temperature of that down is to show us all that there is a plausible path to a more equal, more inclusive future. Now, both sides of that are important. It's important that it's plausible, and it's important that it's inspiring. So what we need to work on together is, how do we paint a vision, a genuinely inspiring, hopeful vision about the kind of country and world that we think we can build together, but then also how do we have a plan? Because that's what makes people take the leap of faith, to have the disruptive idea, to say, I'm willing to go for broke and really go for that vision, even though it feels so far from where we're starting. People will come with us if we have a plausible plan. So I'd like us to simultaneously be idealistic, inspired and inspiring, but also really, really focused and really pragmatic on having a brilliant plan. But from what I've heard from everyone here today and what I'm seeing in the chat, there's no better group of people to be simultaneously visionary, inspiring, and deeply pragmatic and focused. So I believe in us. We can do this, notwithstanding it's hard. I believe it's eminently possible. So let's do it together.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Kirsty. And I know that Almir's taking notes on all of this stuff, so we'll be able to share that afterwards, because I know there's a lot of information there. And I think, I mean, for me, just a key part of it is, once you become aware that these things are going on, then it gives you choices, sort of, as Kirsty says, really. We can then think about how we respond to it, because we become aware of this kind of thing that's going on all around us. Right, I'm going to just say, I know we're probably running a little bit behind time, so if we go off into breakout rooms, there's two things to think about. Obviously discuss whatever's grabbed or challenged you about the conversation so far, but if we could think about negotiating the tension between the need to stand with people and the need to reach out. So think about that. And secondly, this Refugee Week, how can you personally and professionally reach out of your silo? Any of those suggestions would be really helpful. And when people come back, if you want to share stuff in the chat or raise a hand if you want to ask a question of Razan or Kirsty or me, yeah, let's do that. So yeah, breakout rooms. Yeah, thank you everyone. That was really, my own group was really interesting then, and talking about maybe collective acts that people could take together, like beach cleans or kind of gardening projects, that kind of thing. So stuff that's sort of bringing people together in ways that aren't necessarily about the issue itself, but just kind of, yeah, just sort of bringing people together. And we also talked a bit about the more kind of subconscious parts of ourselves, because we had Julienne in our group who's a dancer, and she was talking about reaching into those parts of ourselves through dance and other things. And I guess that's why kind of counterpoint arts sort of lead these projects. There's a ways, basically, again, with another hat on, I'm a trustee at Hope Not Hate, and so many of the projects that we run there are around food primarily. It's basically food, music, and arts. They just feel like ways that people are naturally much more able to connect. So just to look at, where's the chat gone? Let's bring the chat back in and see, is there anyone, or does anyone want to put their hand up and talk about what they discussed in their group? Let me know if I'm missing any hands, Marcia.
Yeah.
Sarah Sandon.
I think our group really just introduced ourselves to each other and talked about our work, but didn't really get down to the questions. But finding this forum really helpful to be able to connect up. So that was really mostly what we did.
Brilliant. So it's very honest, and yeah, also just, I mean, that's part of the point of these things, isn't it? To just meet people and hear what they're doing. And I always find it just really inspiring to know so many people are doing so many amazing things out there.
Mary has her hand up, Ros.
Sorry, Mary.
Hi, yeah, I was in room 8. There were only 3 of us. We talked about food, like you just said, Ros, you know, food and music being good connectors, and they're non-threatening things for people to join in with. So perhaps holding an event where people can taste food from all around the world, or try and bring a musical instrument along from somewhere different, something like that. That was about what we got to, unless the other 2 here want to say anything else from room 8.
Alison, did you want to say something?
Yeah. Well, our group, there was 3 of us. It was quite nice because we had South Wales and Hampshire, and we had London as well. So it was, I think we sort of shared about the communities that we're in, about the amount of change that that communities can experience. And also, I mean, where I am, it's not overly multicultural, it's rural areas. So, but we've got politicians that are making the decisions on, you know, immigration policy. So it's almost like how we can educate and challenge in those areas. So, I mean, we spoke, I mean, we did run out of time. So we did speak, I mean, in our area, we've done an event called Spirit of Music, where we had Syrian refugees do exactly having play music and sharing food and so on. It was really quite impactful, and that made a difference to the culture and how people feel about the area, how people feel about immigration and refugees, asylum seekers. But again, it's just, I mean, again, different areas. We had a vigil in October where the amount of racism that came through on a social media post and the community stuff was just really insightful to see. So it's just kind of, it reinforces the need to, I mean, the communities where we don't receive asylum seekers and refugees, but we're voting blind. I stood in the elections. We really need to be making people aware. So yeah, so it's more you know, things about practically, you know, I think it'd be nice to connect with, say, South Downs National Park around here, and perhaps do inclusive walks and bring local communities together. We just need to think out the box and maybe work across, even across, like, you know, South Downs National Park surrounded by Brighton, Portsmouth, and then going up to Surrey. So, you know, we've got quite a nice opportunity there. So it's just thinking outside of the box of what we can be doing to educate those that this isn't on the radar of, because they're voting, you know, for these absolutely disgusting policies that are coming through.
Brilliant. Yeah, thank you very much. Sarah Towie.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for convening this. We were in a group of 5, and coincidentally, all shared using arts, whether theater, music, writing, food, to, you know, share and focus on our humanity. And we talked a lot about, we talked mostly about how to move conversations, discussions away from the delivered talking points that are reinforced a lot in social media and in the media in general, and look for those between places in the conversation where we all actually have a commonality, where we share common ground, and then to be willing to really listen and not be goaded into taking somebody's point of view personally. So by one way of example, I shared being on the Texas-Mexico border and being goaded into conversations about whether I was open border or closed border, and moving into the center and saying, well, I just feel like cruelty is not okay. And that's where I found commonality with people who would rather build walls than bridges. So always looking for that place in the center where we agree, and then being willing to listen and not take things personally. That's what we talked about.
Brilliant, thank you. That's really inspiring. Fiona McGee.
Hi, yeah, we were in a group of 5, and interestingly, 3 of the 5 came from an access to justice type point of view. I talked about how immigration isn't a devolved matter in Northern Ireland, and whilst we try to shape policy, it's difficult from where we're sitting, and also about the lack of access to immigration and specialist legal advice around the area of immigration and asylum in Northern Ireland, because there's only about 9 solicitors and 10 barristers that are practicing, as well as 2 voluntary organisations that are OASC level 3 registered. But we also talked about, and another person in our group talked about how they do personal stories and portraits to try to raise awareness and push the information and try to change perceptions. And also we talked about how we could use, try to bring those with lived experience to the policymakers to share their voices and have their views heard. But again, it's difficult in Northern Ireland to get that persuasion across, because it's not a devolved matter. But still, in that group as well, most of us were new to Refugee Week, so we're very keen to learn with and work with others on the issues. But it was very useful to get to know others as well, and to understand where different people are coming from on all of this. So thank you.
Thank you. I know we've gone slightly over, but I know Sophia's got her hand up. So shall we we'll give you the last word, Sophia.
Hi, I'm Sophia. Well, I come with a background as well of circus workshops, where I worked together with other families from more deprived areas. And I'm always thinking a good way of bringing this bridge together is actually through youth programs, where you get the information coming, you do family days, where you organize a workshop. It could be puppetry, it could be clay, it could just be going for walks and knowing the areas. And you also invite the other families, so you get them together to talk about their issues, because I agree that finding the common ground is usually the way to go forwards. And I think there's that lack of understanding that they're all on the same boat, especially in the UK with the crisis that is going with housing energy bills and all of these. And this is something maybe they all need to know, that it's not easy. So that's a thought that I had, community work.
Brilliant, thank you very much. I think we have to probably finish there. Marcia, yeah, we have to finish, I think. But thank you so much. Thank you to Razan, thank you to Kirsty. Thanks to everyone here for the incredible work that you're doing in your communities, because we know that that's the work that makes the real difference. And yeah, thank you for coming. And